James Holley, thank you very much for talking with me on the Resident Podcast. I know you as Banana Slug, and more recently, the old guy in Europe.
I'm telling you, he's my friend.
Oh, okay, yeah. But there's a lot of water under the bridge between the Banana Slug days and the old guy in Europe.
Absolutely,
Yeah, I'd love to. I mean, it really tracks your time here in Portugal, doesn't it? From when you arrived to where you've got to now, talking to us live from Espinho, up there. Yeah, we'll come back to Espinho and the places you lived in Portugal and what your experience of being an American here in Portugal is. Can we begin? I know you by those names, but other people might not. How would you describe yourself if you were suddenly in a lift with somebody?
I can do it in almost exactly 4.5 seconds. Hello, I'm James, and I'm an old guy in Europe.
I've heard that before. I think you've done 80-something of those videos on YouTube, and we'll talk about that today as well, because it's remarkable what you've achieved.
I was going to say, I did my sort of Christmas in Espinho episode a couple of weeks ago, and in the introduction to that, even in doing the introduction, I realized that I just got done spending it was my 5th Christmas in Portugal.
Wow. Okay.
And when I said the words, they came out of my mouth. I just sort of went, wow, like 5 years. So in some ways time flies, and in other ways time, just rolls along at its own sweet pace. In that moment, it felt really fast. So
yeah. So 5 Christmases under your belt. How did you get to be here, James?
Well, let me refer you to my YouTube channel. I was thinking about that. It's been a really easy way for people who really, if they really want to know my story, I say, just go to my channel and go to the first 5 episodes. You'll know everything about me and how I got here and why I came and the decisions I made. And everything is in those first 5, including the introduction to what the show is all about. And I promise you, I didn't come on here with this idea I was going to promote the channel. I don't really care about, but it really is a very simple way. If you want the detailed history, episodes 3 and 4 are the first 2 times you and I interviewed together on Good Morning Portugal.
Right.
And they're, I don't know, nearly an hour long each. So it's 2 hours of you and me talking about my whole story about getting here. So
just in case people don't have 2.5 hours to dedicate to that, what's your condensed version?
Condensed version. It's tough for me. It's easy. I mean, it's good that I have the episodes I referred you to, because then I can miss something. It's like, well, they can get it on the channel if they want it. But essentially, to go back to how I got here in the first place, I was within several years of thinking about retiring. I guess I'll just briefly say I've been a public school teacher, and then I was a hairstylist for nearly 20 years, and then I was a psychotherapist. That was my most recent profession, and I did that for about 15 years. I'm actually still doing it very, very part-time, so I call myself mostly.
You've always worked with the heads of people.
Yes, it's always been, learning, educating, and that was, well, I guess I'll talk about that later when we get to talk about what I'm up to now. But so I've done all those things, and as I was approaching, thinking about retiring, there's a lot going on in the United States around 2016 or so, and I was finding myself really unsettled. I was unsettled by what was going on. I was unsettled within myself. And because of my experience in the Navy, it was my first realization that there were other places on the planet besides the United States. And I knew that intellectually, but the arrogance of the American culture is we are the best, we're the greatest, why would anyone want to be anywhere else? I don't think I plugged into that personally, but it's all around you. So this idea that there's this whole world out there that is not this country or this culture was relatively new to me. And the Navy really opened up my eyes there, because I spent 7 months overseas in the Western Pacific. So spent a lot of time bouncing from place to place in Asia on an aircraft carrier. And so, wow, this really is different. Eyes wide open.
Yes.
So I got to this place around 2016. It might have even been a little bit before, where with this realization that I could be anywhere I wanted. If I'm not really feeling it where I am, I'm not really, like I don't want to say I was unhappy. I've always been pretty happy. It's just, I felt like I could do better, and I was feeling unsettled. I was kind of feeling like, where else can I be? Where, and that wasn't just my circumstance. That was within me at the time in my life. So because of all of those things coming together, and I had spent about 20 years in Santa Cruz, California. And I only say that because I got to this place where I was like, all right, James. And in the United States, I was Jim. So that's kind of weird. I still have people in the US who call me Jim. And it's like, oh, I'm not used to that now. It's been 5 years of James here in Portugal. I can talk about that later if you want to. But I said to myself, all right, if you wanted to move, where would you want to go? So I did my analytical mind thing, and I subscribed to a journal called International Living, and I started looking at other places in the world, and they have a really good way of sort of summarizing some of the best places in the world for Americans to settle long term if they want to leave the United States. I put all those pieces together, and I said, okay, well, now, so where do you want to be? It's like, well, let's see. And I initially was looking at Central America, because there were a couple of very US friendly countries where English was spoken readily. Costa Rica even uses the American currency. So I said, okay, well, that transition would be easier in a lot of ways. And I had read and heard a lot of really good things about Costa Rica. So I started looking there, and then I, at some point, realized, okay, climate is going to make a difference for me, because I want to be near the ocean. And in Costa Rica, if you're near the ocean, you're in very humid rainforest type climate. And having spent some time in Asia, I realized, whew, that's not my climate. That is not my climate. So I had to rethink, and I said, well, I don't want to go someplace where the culture is so different. I mean, I'm adventurous to a degree, but it's like, I don't want to, new language, new alphabet, new number system, new, everything's new and different, completely different culture. It's like, no. So I started thinking about Europe, and I hadn't considered Europe initially because, I assumed it was, I was looking for a place I could be and live on my retirement, if that was possible. And I didn't think I could do that in Europe. So I was.
But you thought it might be too expensive?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just, because when I know Europe is much bigger than the countries, if Americans can identify Europe at all. Usually it's France, Spain, Italy, England, maybe Germany, and that's kind of Europe in the American mind for the most part. And there's, I don't know, probably close to there's over 30 countries that make up Europe. So my mind, I was not as educated then as I am now. And as I was thinking, okay, well, culturally, because it is essentially a Western culture, and most of the American English language was based on languages that came out of Europe, that might be an easier transition for me if I go somewhere else. But then I sort of was bouncing around. Well, where do I go? Where do I go? This is nice. That's nice. I don't know anything about it. It was just a lot of confusion, just this idea of going somewhere else and not really knowing where to land. So I finally settled, as I tend to do. And rather than being all analytical and trying to break it all down to on a spreadsheet, I just stopped and I said, all right, you have these ideas of places you want to go, but then you say why you can't. So let's just stop and let's just look at, if you could choose anywhere in the world that you would want to settle, regardless of any other circumstances, nothing else being an issue, you could just go where you wanted, where would that be? And that answer was very, very clear. Instantly, I thought Santa Cruz, California, where I had spent 20 years of my life and I wanted to go back, but by the time I had gone back to the San Francisco East Bay to grad school and then done my internship and gotten my license in psychotherapy, I had been priced out of Santa Cruz. I mean, the cost of living there just skyrocketed. And I said, okay, well, in advance that that's not available to you, but at least now you're very clear about what you're looking for. I'm looking for the Santa Cruz, California of somewhere in the world.
So you would know how you would be feeling and what your experience of life would be.
Well, it would, at the very least, it would take me back to the pull of the ocean for me. And in particular, while I've never even been on the Atlantic coast of the United States, my experience of the coast was from California. So it was a West Coast on the ocean. That's what I was familiar with. And that was the vibe that I felt. And that's what the yearning for Santa Cruz was. So I said, well, okay, Europe, West Coast, ocean. There's really only one country that satisfies that, right? And it happened to be a country that in International Living consistently in their annual summary of the best countries for U.S. Residents to settle, Portugal was coming up in the top 5 every year. And the year I really started looking at it, it was number 1 on their listing. So I said, okay, Portugal, I'd never thought of that. At least I knew where it was. So I can't even tell you how many. When I told people that I was looking at Portugal, they go, oh, so where is that? Like Central America or South America? Where's Portugal? Word. I mean, people just had no idea. And I don't know that it's fair to stereotype Americans this way, but my experience is that most of the sort of day-to-day Americans that I knew really had no idea of geography outside of the state of California, much less the rest of the world. Had no interest in world news unless it was impacting the United States and more specifically them personally. So, so I at least knew where Portugal was, and I knew very little other about it than what I had read in International Living. So I started looking at it. And I literally got on Google Maps and started looking at the coast of Portugal. That was my start. So, okay, there's Lisbon. Okay, that's really big, and Porto. So I got familiar with the geography and knew very little about the coast. Somewhere, I don't know how. It was probably on YouTube. I saw something on Ericeira. And that caught my eye because it was on the coast and it was within a decent distance to Lisboa for airport and transportation and so on and so forth. I said, well, that might be worth looking at. And the more I looked, I discovered it was an international surfing destination. And I said, well, Santa Cruz is an international surfing destination too. And my joke was ultimately that Ericeira even had a statue of a surfer overlooking the ocean, which Santa Cruz had. I said, okay. And there was something about the vibe, something as I was looking at the videos and getting a sense of what life in that place was like, it just started feeling right, that place. And I did, kind of hold out and say, well, what about these other coastal places? What's this Setúbal place? And these kinds of things. And I chuckle for those who don't know the Portuguese language because it's actually Setúbal, but not Setúbal, which is what it looks like.
You're forgiven, aren't you, for that looking from afar?
Yes. So all of that brought me to Ericeira. And as I have said before, for me, my experience has been that once I'm very clear about what it is I'm creating for myself, then the rest of the experience is kind of like I took a jigsaw puzzle box and emptied it out on the table and started watching it assemble itself.
Mm.
And I would have to say, oh, this piece probably goes over here, a little fiddling about. It's not like I didn't have to do anything, but it became very, very simple. The pieces just started falling together. So in the process of wanting to learn the language or start learning the language before I went, I got on some Ericeira sites and I said, anyone interested in a language exchange, American English for Portuguese? I don't know how many people I reached, but it was several Facebook sites. And I got one reply saying, yes, I would be interested. And I said, okay, well, I don't have a whole lot to choose from, so let's start there. And this woman's name was Louisa, and she was interested. Turns out she is fluent in English and French and Portuguese. She's Portuguese born and raised, and is a teacher in Portugal who teaches French primarily. So we made a connection. We made an arrangement to meet once a week to, talk about language exchange, which really never happened much. It almost instantly became more of a cultural exchange than a language exchange, and more just the building and developing of a friendship. But at the same time, it was with someone who was living in Ericeira, so she could give me details if I had questions about the place, and so on and so forth. So we developed this relationship, which led to, as I started approaching actually making the decision to move, or having made the decision to move, I was going to need to find some place to live. And I asked her, where might be a good place, or maybe I didn't, and she just started talking about it. But she told me that she had fairly recently converted her single car garage into a studio unit. Now it shared a common wall to the house, but it had, the only connection was a door, but it was a totally independent, self-sufficient studio unit. And I said, wow, that sounds really great. And she said, yeah. So when do you think you'll be coming? And I had kind of a rough idea. And she said, well, I currently have someone in it, but they're just here for the summer. If you're coming in October, it will probably be available, and you could stay here at least until you find, someplace that you want to stay more permanently. And the rent was amazing, and the situation was amazing. And again, just here, life, the universe saying, here, have a place to live. You don't have to look. It's taken care of. Take that. I said, okay, I'm not going to fight this. I'll just go with it. It feels right. I've done what research I can do from afar. So here I go. And
so Ericeira then, in terms of that mirroring of your experience and giving you landmarks and a focus, did it turn out as you hoped?
Well, yes and no. I mean, obviously it wasn't exactly as I had imagined, because I had just imagined it. But yes. But I was not disappointed ever. And I, if anything, I kept being surprised at how great it was and how much more it was than what I thought it was going to be. And one of the things that I liked about Santa Cruz, and I say this a lot to people, is that the surfing culture, there's a certain vibe to it. And people, oh, do you surf? It's like, no, I don't surf. But there is a certain energy that a significant number of people who have a passion for surfing and then come and be in the community and influence that community, there's a certain feel to it that I haven't felt in any other place but Santa Cruz and Ericeira. And so even that was similar. So I had arrived here thinking, okay, well, I have a home base, and I'll probably plan on staying there for a year as I look throughout the country and see, if there's a more suitable place for me. And 4 years later, I was still in Ericeira, still in my studio in Ericeira, and loving life there, loving life. And the only thing that that caused me to think about going somewhere else, well, there were a few things. One is I realized that transportation, while readily available, there were probably close to 20 buses a day that went to Lisboa right from Ericeira. So I could hop on a bus and get to Lisboa, to the airport or the train station or whatever, relatively easily. But while it was only a 10-minute walk to the bus stop, it was a hour and 40-minute bus ride to Lisboa, where driving a car is 40 minutes. So it is relatively close. But if I wanted to use just public transportation. I didn't want to have a car if I didn't need to. So that was another consideration. So by the time I started realizing that to get to a train or to get to the airport was 2 hours, basically, from where I lived. And that was a little farther than I wanted to be. I was living in a sort of a suburban area of Ericeira, so it was farther up in the hills, east of the villa. So it was basically all downhill to Ericeira and all uphill to where I lived. And to walk it was a 45 or 50-minute walk. And one of my ideas, moving to Santa Cruz, California, Portugal, was that I would be able to walk to the beach in 5 minutes. So that didn't happen based on where I was located in Ericeira. But as I got familiar, I started realizing that because one of my ideas was I would be walking a lot, because when I went to Italy for a couple of weeks on vacation, that's all we did was walk. And I felt as I was in the best shape of my life after 2 weeks in Italy. I said, okay, well, that would be good. I could, make this move, be near the beach, walk every day. That'll be great. That didn't work out for me. And so I thought, well, maybe I could move somewhere else in Ericeira that's closer to the ocean. But what I realized is even if you lived 5 minutes to the beach, it was still practically straight uphill and downhill to get wherever you lived. It's like, so I just had to ultimately own my laziness. No, I'm not willing to work that hard if I don't have to. So my mind started expanding. Where else might I be that would suit me better? And as I was here for, as I said, 4 years, there were other practical things like, where do you get your medical appointments? Where do you go for your appointments? How long does it take to get there on public transportation? How near are you to a hospital if you might need one? Those kinds of things that I hadn't really thought of too much.
And this is based on not having your own car. I mean, you're proving, aren't you? And you have proved that it is possible to live in Portugal without public transport if you choose wisely. And that's part of this new decision process, isn't it? Which took you to Espinho ultimately. Yeah,
well, I made 2 very good friends through Good Morning Portugal, the Good Morning Portugal show, Hank and Connie Stolica. And they live up in Vila Nova de Gaia, which is just across the river from Porto. So I, at one point, decided I would take the train up and go visit them. So I did that. And on the train, as we got farther north, and I later learned we were within about 30 kilometers of Porto, just south of it, I started noticing when I was looking out on the west side of the train, I was seeing these parallel streets going by like this, but I was seeing the ocean at the end of the street. And I said, what's that? And of course, the train was moving so fast. It was like, trying to get a look down the street very quickly as we were heading north. That's what caught my eye. And the architecture a little farther north of Espinho, but it said, oh, I'll need to come back here and check this out. This looks interesting. So that was my very first exposure to the Espinho area. I started investigating a little bit more, again, through YouTube videos and so on. I took a few trips to Espinho to get a sense of what it was like there. I chose Espinho because it was the largest village that I could find between Aveiro and Porto. Okay. And most of the coastal towns were relatively small, and so I realized that by virtue of its size, it wasn't over large, because I'm not a big city kind of guy. population-wise, may be a little larger than Ericeira, but not much. But the infrastructure, rather than a 2-hour bus ride to catch a train somewhere, it was a 10-minute walk to the train station in the center of Espinho. And the ongoing thing I tell people is, from where I live now in Espinho, it's pretty much a 10-minute walk anywhere I want to go.
Brilliant.
And it's pretty much flat. So I don't have these hills that I don't want to go up there, even if it's just 10 minutes.
Great criteria for people considering where to live in Portugal, and places they may not have heard of as well. So
yes,
that's really, really helpful and useful.
Additionally, it has a public hospital right in Espinho. I've discovered there's an IMA office right in Espinho, although it hasn't done me any good to have it there, because IMA's just, they assign appointments where they're available. Yes. And so I once wanted an appointment to get my my address changed on my residence card, and I got an appointment in Cascais.
Yes, of course.
Which is only nearly 4 hours away.
Yes, a day
by
trip.
Train. Yes.
It's like Guayma. Wow.
just to change my address.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Yes.
Happily living in Espinho now, having tried Ericeira, both beautiful places, and notably a Santa Cruz near Ericeira as well, which I went to, which I thought was delightful over the Christmas period.
Yes, yes.
And you are, that brings us pretty much up to date, doesn't it? With your 5-year, is it coming to 6 years here in Portugal?
It'll be, where am I? I'm at 4, a little over 4. My 5-year permanent residency renewal will be in February of 26. So
another day trip to a far-flung part of Portugal. Right.
Probably not. It'll be, I'm thinking it'll at least only be to Porto, which is just a 30-minute, 40-minute train ride. So it'll be closer. But yes.
Now, can I ask you, that's a wonderful portrait of your motivation and where you've ended up, and an insight into a couple of really lovely places for people. American in Portugal. Now, I think I heard you say, and this is the big sort of elephant in the room conversation at the moment, but I think I heard you use the word unsettled about being in the United States and wanting to move. Is that true? You back in 2016, you had a sense of, this is a country I might not want to spend the rest of my life in.
Well, as I mentioned, it actually was forming prior to 2016, but 2016 kind of turn the heat up a little bit. What
was going on then?
Well, mostly political. It was Trump's first election. I didn't like the direction politics was going. I didn't like the direction the country was following with his lead in terms of racism and shutting down environmental protections and things that I just going, oh my God, no, this is not what I signed up for. And I'd gotten pretty spoiled because I had never been faced with those kinds of challenges in the US before. And I was living in Northern California, which is, a pretty progressive area of the United States. Yeah. So I was already thinking, I don't know, it's kind of expensive to live here. Healthcare has been talked about for 20 or 30 years and nothing's been done. And there's people some people who have public healthcare available just don't really understand that people really, really are one illness away from homelessness. And this isn't just some verbiage to try and stir people up. Literally, you can get sick and it will cost, you'll have to mortgage your home to pay the medical payments to survive whatever it is. It's a more extreme case, but it's not rare. It's not like, and people don't understand that. And I was looking at, essentially having nothing but my Social Security and thinking that's not going to work for me. I'm going to need to figure out something else. And in the meantime, my father had already passed in 1999, but my mother passed in mid 2016. And by virtue of that, my sister, brother, and I inherited a third of the value of the house, which had gone up considerably from the time it was purchased, and it was paid off. So we we split 100% of what the house sold for, which it's like, oh, there's the universe working for me again, because I was looking at living on my measly Social Security and have very fortunately figured, it took me a while, figured out how to invest in a way that I could get my money to work for me. And now I can relax completely. It's like, oh,
Good
and
for you.
having lived in Portugal for 1 year, I gave it that to kind of get a sense of what does it actually cost for me to be here, to pay my rent and my bills and da-da-da. It took a year. And I realized that I could live as and I was comfortable. I wasn't holding back. I wasn't like, oh my God, I have to watch every penny. It's just like, spend what you spend and see what happens. And I was living on less than what my Social Security is in the United States. So I knew, I knew then that I would be fine.
Right.
So the investments I had have just been frosting on the cake, so to speak, extra insurance, and potentially, as we age, it might become more expensive if you need, some senior healthcare residence or something that's more expensive than just rent. Anyway, I just knew that was very reassuring for me. It's like, oh, I can live here comfortably, very comfortably. I don't have to decide whether I need to take advantage of that 20-cent coupon. It wasn't that. Just buy what I want, and if organic's available, buy that because that's what you want. If you want to go take a train trip somewhere in Portugal, you can do that. You'll be able to afford to travel a couple of times a year if you want to, see other places in Europe, which I do. I just haven't done it yet, really, other than going to Dublin once for about a week. So everything has worked out, and I understand that's not true for some people.
Like it. No, fair enough. But it's lovely to talk to you and hear how Portugal has really worked out for you. And I'd like to. There's a couple more things, and we're running out of time. I mean, this has flown by.
Has it been that fast? So fast?
Well, there's two things. I want to know how Portugal has had its effect. Portugal and Europe have had their effect on you as an American. But yeah, going back to the elephant in the room issue and your inkling of the direction of travel of the United States. Turn on the TV at the moment, and in some ways, some might say the things that you couldn't stomach and wanted to make an alternative plan around have only exacerbated. How is that for you? And what would you say to other Americans who are thinking of quitting America to come to Portugal? And how do you cope with that? The situation of what's going on in the United States, which is extraordinary. Presumably in 2016, you'd never imagined it would be quite so dramatic.
I never imagined that president would ever get reelected again.
Right.
And he almost did, running it for a second term. And that for me, the 2020 was where I really had to start examining, is this the kind of place I want to live? And I don't know. I sometimes hesitate to make the comparison, but I imagine what it must have felt like to people in Germany in 1930, 33, 34, in there, where things are shifting fast and shifting in directions they were not sure they wanted to be involved in. It was starting to feel like that to me. And I'm a huge advocate, and I don't recommend anyone move to get away from someplace. Do not move to run away. Move to find a place that suits you better.
Yes.
And that's what I was looking for, and that's why I thought of that. Is when you're talking about Portugal, that was a big piece of it. I have told American and Portuguese friends who want to know sort of what the difference culturally is for me, and so I've summarized it, that my experience in the United States was that it's more of a culture of I'll get mine and you get yours, and I wish you well. It doesn't have to be. Sometimes it's a lot worse than that. People don't wish you well, but I'm just saying that'll be true almost anywhere. But it's a sense of it's up to you. Your life is completely up to you. Whether you go homeless because you get sick, that's on you. I'm not going to take care of it. You can't come to me to look for help. That's not part of the culture. we're structured in a way that you are able to do it yourself. So go do that. It's kind of how it feels. Now, there are many generous people in the United States, many people who don't hold it that way. But generally, as a culture, that's what I experience. And in Portugal, what I have experienced, again, very generally, and it's not true 100%, but my experience has been Portugal is a culture of how can I help? And energetically, it's just two different worlds. And that's much more my whole life. I felt at odds with this culture I was in about struggling to get it on your own and helping people in need and all this stuff that wasn't being addressed. And in Portugal, it's like, how can we help? Now, I can't go ask my neighbor to pay my rent for me. That's not going to happen, probably anywhere in the world. But in terms of a willingness to do what I can, it's just night and day. And that for me was much more suited to my energy. I have said that in the US, I didn't realize it till I got to Portugal. I was kind of aware of it. I felt like I was always swimming upstream and that the current was getting stronger. When I talk about feeling unsettled, that's what was feeling. The current was feeling stronger. It's like I was having to swim harder and harder just to stay where I was.
Yep.
And when I got to Portugal, it's like, I can just lay back and float. And the current's taking me exactly where I want to go. It's like, there's nothing to fight. There's nothing to struggle against. Just essentially go with the flow and it's all good. And I'm not trying to paint this fantasy world. It's not that. There's real life to live. There's renewing changing your address on your residency card. I still haven't got it done. It's been 6 months. There's administrative bureaucratic stuff you have to deal with in a different language. So it's not like, oh, it's all simple, easy and all that. But to struggle with those things, I would much rather do it in Portugal in a language that I don't yet speak than to deal with that kind of stuff and still be living in the United States. So for me, it's well worth it.
I get it. And so you found an energetic match on the one hand, who you want to be, who you've wanted to be, has found a resonance here in Portugal. How has it changed you in ways that presumably you wouldn't have expected? Yeah, has there been a Portuguese-European effect on you as an American and changed you?
Well, it certainly opened my eyes to something I kind of had a feeling about, but didn't really know from experience, which is generally, if you're talking about Europe in general, I'm feeling a much more progressive attitude. And when I say progressive, it's one in which it's incumbent on the government to help take care of its citizens in ways that don't happen in the United States. Primarily, and the biggest relief was when I realized I qualified for public health care. It's like, okay, I don't have to worry about that, like at all. I don't have to worry about getting sick. I don't have to worry about going to the hospital. I don't have to worry about emergency. Zero, no concern. And the weight that just evaporated away, I just can't speak to it beyond what I've just said. That's huge. And I had a friend from the Netherlands once who visited the United States a lot, and she was observing to me. She says, I've been here a lot. And I said, yeah, at least once a year for a couple of months, for several years. And she said, and America has always felt very much like the Netherlands to me. But there was something subtly different that I couldn't put my finger on. And she says, I think I have figured it out. And what I have figured out is in the Netherlands, nobody is worried about their future. Nobody is worried that they're going to die in poverty and not have a home and not be taken care of, their health, not be taken care of. Nobody is worried about that. It's not a burden. It's not even something that people talk about or think about. And that is pretty much all the Americans think about and talk about. And you can feel the weight of that. And that, different. So, I have been an advocate of universal healthcare, public healthcare for decades. So actually living in it can't speak enough, highly enough about how much difference that makes in terms of our concerns for our well-being. I'm not afraid of growing old in Portugal. I know that I'll be taken care of one way or another.
Well, that's quite something to be able to say, isn't it? And
Yes.
finally, then, as somebody who we've identified as helped people with their heads one way or another, if not cutting their hair, educating them, or as a psychotherapist, you may have something useful to add in conclusion, James, for fellow American expats, immigrants, foreigners who are making their future in Portugal and may well feel the same way as you. And, you know, inevitably an eye in the rearview mirror about what's going on at home. How do you handle that in terms of a mental health issue about what's going on back in the United States from which you came?
Well, long before I moved, I realized that watching commercial news and reading commercial news papers and magazines was just bringing me down. So I stopped doing that in the US. Of course, I would continue to be surrounded by it, and it's impossible to escape it. Even if you're not tuning in, you're still getting it. But when I made the decision to move to Portugal, I made the decision to move away from the United States for good. I mean, it was a solid decision. There was no back door. There was no, and then I would get into well, what if it's not what you want? It's like, all right, the what if, worst case scenario. I can't stand it. I can't find a way to be okay with it at all. I'll go back. That was my absolute worst case scenario. But I was clear that was my absolute worst case scenario, and it never even started moving in that direction. It only went the opposite direction as I lived here. So I'm here for good. I have this fantasy, and maybe that's just a part of who I am. Maybe there's another place that's better for you. It's very difficult to imagine, given what I've experienced in Portugal, and the advantage to being in Portugal or pretty much anywhere in Europe is that I'm literally a 2 to 3 hour flight to pretty much anywhere else in Europe. And because my living conditions and my cost of living are such that I can travel as much as I want, I could go to every country in Europe for a month, for the rest of my life, and I could do that. So it's not like I have to live there, but I can experience it. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to doing more travel. It's why I named my channel An Old Guy in Europe and not An Old Guy in Portugal, because I wanted to be able to expand and share my experiences of other places that I go for vacations or long-term visits or whatever.
Do I take from that then it's be where you are? Is possibly the advice. Invest in where you are and and for me, as you know, mindfulness is my thing. Well, maybe not my thing, but being self-aware and looking inward when things are up. So if I start feeling antsy, like, ooh, I really want to go somewhere else, like, what's that about? And usually it's about, I'm just tired of dealing with this bureaucratic thing and not getting anywhere with it. That's usually what it is. It's not some deep down need or, nothing like that. Yeah. So when I realized that, then I settled down a little bit and go, okay. But what I would highly recommend to anyone who's looking is, first of all, good on you for looking. Keep looking and look as much as you can, especially before you make a life-altering decision like I'm moving out of the country forever. It's a big decision, but you're not going to get it all from the United States. You're just not. I was 95% certain that the move I was making was exactly the move that was going to work for me. And I was right. But I had that much certainty because I was looking, why are you moving? What's the pull? What's available? What's important to you? And there were things that I thought were important to me that weren't so much, and other things that were more important. But I discovered that as I got here, but none of them were significant in a way like, oh, I got to get out of here. I blew it. So you need to do that kind of research. If you can get boots on the ground, do it, but it's not absolutely essential. And spend a little time outside of your head. Get into your heart. I've made mention of the vibe several times. What does it feel like to be there?
And you really get the feeling when you come, but you don't really get what it's like to live a day-to-day life for, several years in a 2-week vacation. You're not going to get that. You're going to get the infatuation of wherever you are because you're on vacation for 2 weeks. But take that into consideration. If you do that and you come with an attitude of curiosity and not one of expectation, say, okay, I'll get there and I'll see. I'll find out. Rather than, ooh, it's got to be this, it's got to be that. And then if it's not that, what if, and all that other stuff we do. Just go and find out. It's a great experiment. I think you and I have talked about the experiment of making that decision and in life in general, rather than needing to be certain about everything. Go with an open mind and with a curiosity, and see how close you were to being right when you made your choice to go check that place out. And the more you discover that it's working for you, then the more you discover it's working for you, and you don't have to suddenly pull up roots. Do not come here expecting it to be the same as wherever you're from. It's not going to be. It's just not. If you want that, then don't leave because you're not going to find it anywhere in the world.
What an interesting note to end on. James, thank you so much. If you'd like to keep in touch with James and his continuing adventure and experiment and love affair, it has to be said, with Portugal, you can do that on YouTube at An Old Guy in Europe. James, thank you so much, my friend.
It's been my pleasure. I really appreciate it.